Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. Scott Martin, Bonsai Matsu. Thank you for listening in, really appreciate it. This Bonsai Stuff podcast wouldn't be here without your contribution and your support and the fact that it gets through to so many different corners of the globe of so many little tree lovers like myself, which is fantastic. The messages that you send me about how this podcast supports you in different ways and that it means so much to you is really well received. So thank you very much. It means a hell of a lot to me. And happy Easter. It's that time of the year where, if that's your persuasion, happy Easter. Hopefully you've had a nice break. Always love this time of year. It's a bit of downtime for me. Get a bit of a stopgap between the work that needs to get done on the trees, as well as other work related stuff. But everyone gets to have a decent break around Easter time, and with the public holidays the way they fall, it's a nice time to stop and smell the chocolates. To be honest, it's hopefully you haven't had too many chocolates this time of year, but it is a nice time to sit back and maybe just draw a breath before. I know for myself, it's just around the corner from a pretty busy time when the pine work really starts to crank up and get moving. So I want to make sure that I'm well rested, that there's a few things I want to talk about today in the podcast. Like one is my tools. I want to just do a quick little overview on some tool maintenance that I do at this time of the year, because it does help when you can look at them in the cold hard light of day and just see if there's a few things that need to be tightened up. Maybe there's some replacement. There's a little bit of maintenance you've got to do. So I'll just have a yabber on about that. And also this time of the year, with my feet sitting up, maybe enjoying a little bit of AFL on the TV and a couple of cold ales, I can have a look also at my trees and go through what needs to be done for the rest of the year. We're a third of the way through the year, if you can believe it. One third of 2025 has gone down the gurgler already. It seems to be zipping past yet again for another bonsai year. So this, coming to the close of the second month of autumn, so it's probably a really good time to just do an overall review. Make sure you can give yourself a score out of 10 as to your contribution for your trees and how they're progressing. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And also, just want to finish up. Like I said, it's a nice time for me for reflection and to sit back and have a look at the world according to Scott. And I just, I was thinking, where would my life be without bonsai? So I'll just have a yak about that too. So anyway, settle in, get yourself a nice Easter egg, and let's get into the podcast. So it's nice to have a little bit of time at your sleeve to sit back and look at things. And I wanted to talk about tools, because it's definitely something that I do around this time of the year. Every year, it's they've been flogged, they've been worked on. I do maintain my tools to a very high standard because of what I do, and that I need them. That's my profession is as a bonsai professional. So you're only as good as your tools, but your tools are only as good as you looking at how you look after them. So I do definitely maintain them to a very high standard. But I think it's time for everybody just to stop and have a look. You maybe last did it, let's say around Christmas. That's also a good time when you get some time off work and you have a few days up your sleeve every now and then once the madness of the Christmas rush is over, and you get to look at your tools. Now it's time for me to look at them. Probably, not only do the clean, rust remover to get rid of the sap and all the usual stuff. Make sure the blades are nice and sharp. Yeah, that's all normal, and you should be doing that every time that you work on your trees. But actually do an assessment of the tools themselves. And it's when you buy tools, I don't care whether you're paying $10 or 10,000. These things, because it is metal grinding on metal almost invariably with everything that we do, they wear down and they are not designed to last forever, even though you'd like to think they're with you forever. And I've definitely got some special tools that I have put away just for special occasions and special trees and whatever, but they're not designed to be around forever, and they shouldn't be. Like I don't know if consumable is the right word for it, but they are something which degrades over time if you're using them as much as what I do with mine. You may not. Like a couple of trees, you might find that they will last you forever if you look after them. But I find that there's a couple of key things that I look for. And I'll just talk about your wire cutters for now. And if you don't have proper bonsai wire cutters, get yourself a pair. They make a massive difference. They make life so much easier. And it sounds crazy until you've actually got them and you've used them and you see the impact that they have, especially with wire removal. And that was a bit of a controversial one about cutting wire off and reusing whatever. I do appreciate everyone's comments about that. From a few episodes ago, but my approach is to cut it off and keep the tree taking steps forward. Anyway, but with the wire cutters themselves, you'll find that especially when you're cutting heavier wire, and it doesn't need to be copper wire, it can just be thicker wire, you'll find that there's a lug that holds the handles together. And when you first buy them, that's tight, or it should be tight. That's one thing you should look for. There should be no play in those handles. So if you get those handles, and rather than opening them up and closing them, if you wiggle them up and down against each other, when you first get your wire cutters, there should be next to no play whatsoever. But over time, with that pressure and that force that you apply to the wire cutters, you'll find that little lug starts to wear down. It's not designed to last forever, and it can't be replaced normally. I've never seen it able to be replaced. Like, it's a fixed thing. And as those handles start to move, what happens is if you are getting a bit of play in there, like maybe 3 or 4 millimeters, something like that. Maybe it's not quite that bad yet, but you'll feel it. Like, if there's a bit of play in there, you'll look at the tip of the wire cutters and the blades will start to be off, which means that as you're putting pressure on to make future cuts of wire, that cut isn't going to be nice and neat, which might mean that when you're trying to cut wire, you might have to do it 2 or 3 times to get the cut through. Doesn't sound like much, but for me, I find it to be a real pain, like an absolute pain in the bum, because I want, when I do things, I don't want to have to redo them over and over and over. And it also, when you are cutting wire, if those blades don't meet up neatly, you can get a really sharp, jagged edge on the end of the wire, which, depending on how thick it is and how much your hands are going in and out of the tree and how dense the tree is, but that sort of thing, I find that I'm prone to nicking myself and cutting myself with that tag of the wire, and it just annoys the hell out of me. So one thing, not only am I oiling, I use good machine oil that you can get from the hardware store. For my tools, I like to make sure they're nice and clean. I use like a WD-40 or some kind of spray on the tools to clean them. I wipe them all down, make sure there's no rust. I oil them so they're free moving in my hand, working exactly the way it should be. But for things that have got those fixed lugs, you've got to make sure there's no play in there as well. And if there is, maybe it might not be bad enough to be replacing them now. But like I said, we're sort of a third of the way through the year, which means we're getting close towards Christmas. Maybe it's something you put on the bonsai Christmas list or the wish list for yourself, that it's something you plan to replace somewhere in the future, and just keep an eye on when it starts getting to the point that they're useless. Because it's happened to me. Like, I was really surprised with the first pair. Loved them. These beautiful little wire cutters. I still have them to be used when I do work with schools and whatever else. But the cutting quality of them now, I look back and think, I love those things, and I was so sad to replace them. But as soon as I replaced them, it was like, oh, that's so much better, so much easier. So the other thing, some tools, like your scissors, for instance, will have an adjustable lug in there, and so you'll be able to see it. It's like a raised section between the blades. So if you get your scissors and they sort of have that play in there as well, you can gently, with if you put it on something very hard like an anvil or a vise or something like that, you can get a hammer and you can gently tap that lug, and that lug compresses and then tightens up. Just be really careful. And I've stuffed a lot of pair of scissors doing this by hitting it too hard, and that lug compresses too hard, and then the scissors become too stiff to use, and then you're not waiting to Christmas to replace them. You're actually replacing them almost immediately, because they become useless once that lug gets too tight. So it's I find when your scissor handles are open, there'll be quite a bit of movement in there. So it's really what they're like when they come closer together. If they're cutting and you can hear that blade grinding against or slicing against the other blade, then that's fine. But if you sort of get to the tip and when the handles are closed, if you can find that you're getting 3 or 4 millimeters of movement, then your cuts aren't going to be nice and clean, which means you're going to be starting to smash through the woodwork on the bonsai, which means that the cuts just won't heal like they should. It's going to be, you want precision, you want medical precision when you're cutting, so things heal as quickly as they can. So don't don't just leave them in that state. Make sure that you're working your tools to be the best they possibly can. And your branch cutters fall into exactly the same scenario, that over time that little lug that's in there starts to wear down. Put it on your vise, something firm, and just give it a gentle tap with the hammer a couple of times. Test the handles, another couple of taps, and you'll work out what the sweet spot is. Just don't go too far. Get it to a close point. That's fine. But if you find that they've got a lot of play, a lot of movement in there, doesn't oiling them and cleaning them, it's not going to make them efficient. So and the other thing too is once you've worked the blades and you've sharpened them, your shelf feet, for a long period of time, you might find that you start to lose the bevel on the blade. I have in the past taken my tools to professional sharpeners, and maybe people that do kitchen knives and stuff like that, or kitchen scissors, they're perfect. But I've had them sharpen my scissors and branch cutters, and they've come back like brand new tools. So that's another piece of advice for you, that at this time of the year, just do that assessment of your tools. But keep in mind that they aren't designed to last forever. They've got to be working really, really well and at peak condition for your trees to keep taking steps forward. If they're not, maybe go and see a professional tool repairer, tool sharpener, and just see if they can help you with it. But ultimately, from my experience, you'll be looking at some point down the track of replacing those tools, which is not a bad thing. It's it's something we all have to go through. Now I go on a lot. I mean, a hell of a lot about planning, and I don't want to spend too much on this, but I find that it's really important and useful that when I'm at this point in the year, like a third of the way in, it's it's only a short period now until the year's over, and it's nice for me to start reviewing my plans that I've got for every one of my trees in the collection. And it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be the end of year review. It's just like one of those quick catch ups with your boss at work or your manager at work, where it's like that quick assessment. Hey, how's everything going? Are you on track? How are you feeling? Is everything good? Is there anything I can do for you? Or if maybe things aren't up to scratch, hey, listen, I really want you to focus on this part, or this, this is your focus, your part of the contract. So when the year comes around and then you're doing the end of year review, it's not a big surprise about where things are at. Like, it's all cards are on the table. So I do it all the time with my trees, but I really find that this time of the year is time for me to get out there and say, hey, how's it going? How are you looking? Have you done well? Like, you've got through summer, you've survived. There's been no dieback. Now, what about my part of the contract? I've fertilized you really well. I've made sure that I've done everything I can. I've watered you when you needed water. Do I need to flag you for repotting? Yep. Okay. Well, I've got that coming up as well. And even if the tree maybe has had a bit of a setback, like there's been some leaf burn or there's been something happen with the tree, it's like, cool. Okay. So how do the buds look after that? Is it progressing? And I just find, for me, it's a really nice way to just make sure that everyone's on track, but more importantly that I'm living up to my end of the agreement, which is the most important part. Like, trees can only do what trees do. But for me, it's like, okay, I want all my trees to take a step forward. It might be that you want a sacrifice branch to grow 15 meters. You want a trunk to go from the size of your little finger to the size of your thigh, whatever it is. But to make sure that you're on track, you need to. I review heavily what my engagement is, and have I done what's best for the bonsai to make sure they're going to achieve it. I can't just sit back and say, hey, you didn't do anything this year. It just went backwards. Okay, what did the tree do wrong? I don't know. It just didn't grow. Well, why didn't it grow? Have a look at. You got to have a really this part of the review, the third of the year review that I do. It's more a focus on me to make sure that I'm living up to my end of the bargain. And I look right next to where I'm recording this podcast right now. There's a couple of whiteboards. One's a monthly planner showing, hey, this month you've got to do whatever. The other is a list of requirements and other things that I have to plan for, whether it's courses or workshops, whatever it is. But on there's a list of things, and I'll give you an example. So obviously there's fertilizing on there for me. There's reminders about spraying my trees because I'm really fastidious with that. I'm on edge about. Not on edge, but I'm very strict with how I look after my trees, having so many in my collection and wanting to maintain them at such a high level. So that's definitely something that's on there. There may not necessarily be future dates of when I've got it, but it will have historical dates of when I have done it, so I know as a reminder. Monthly calendar will have a reminder in there saying, hey, about this period, depending on weather, you need to make sure you've done these sort of jobs. But there's another one on there. The example I'll give you is there's a beautiful big melaleuca that I've got that I've grown from an enormous cutting. That's a whole other story for somewhere in the future. But this thing's going to be a really, really nice tree. And it was wired a while ago because it's still at that primary, secondary branch stage. And I walked past it the other day when I was putting out fertilizer bags, and I said to myself, hey, look at that wire. That's getting close to cutting in. All right, that job goes on the board. That's on the whiteboard. And it doesn't come off until I have done it. So every time I sit down, every time I walk through my office to my workshop, first thing I see is this list on the whiteboard, remove wire from melaleuca. Cool. Okay. That's an important job. So it's in red. It's got to get done. Make sure it's done. I've done it. I've removed the wire. I go through and I put a line through it, check it off the list. So it's a part of the contract that I have with that tree, with that melaleuca, to make sure that it keeps taking steps forward, is that it's on me to do the jobs that I promise I'll do. And wire removal is a massive one for me. I don't want ugly scarring across the trunk, and that's not a tree issue. I want the tree to get bigger and thicker and stronger and grow all this foliage and develop secondary branches and get down to ramification stage. So I'm fertilizing it heavily. I'm watering it well. It's in a beautiful sunny spot. It's in a great mix. I'm doing all this other stuff. But if I then go and leave the wire on this tree and it cuts in, it becomes ugly, the first thing I start thinking of is, okay, that's going to take either a long time to remove or it's going to be there forever. So therefore I need to take a step backwards with that tree, look at a trunk chop, look at branch removal, look at whatever it is, and I go back and start again. So on one hand, I'm asking the tree to do all this developmental stuff, but then if I don't live up to my end of the bargain by removing the wire when it should be removed, then that's a red mark against my name. It's not against the bonsai. The bonsai has done exactly what I've asked it to do. It's a red mark against my name saying, hey, you're not living up to your end of the bargain. So planning, reviewing, it's looking in the back corners of your bench, making sure that nothing's been missed. Are they on track? Is it growing the way it should be going? If it's not, can you honestly look at yourself in the mirror and say, that tree is not developing? Are you partially responsible for that in any way? Was it repotted when it should have been? Has it been fertilized like it should be fertilized? And if it hasn't, well, that's not on the tree, that's on you. But you've still got 2/3 of the year left to go. So it's not a oh well, it's over, forget about it, I'll start again next year. It's like, no. What can you do now to change things? You've still got just over a month of autumn left. You've still got just over a month of that strength building, that growing. Get out, do it, change things, and make sure that you're ramping it up to make sure that you can achieve it. And that's what I mean. Like I love this period of the year, having this little bit of extra time up your sleeve. Yeah, you can enjoy it. You can do all the nice stuff. You can do all the family stuff. You can do all the personal stuff. But it's a really nice time to do that self-reflection and plan review for your bonsai, because it makes such a big difference. And it's not a time to be harsh, but it's a time to be honest and really, really review it and make sure that your trees are taking those steps forward that that'll make you happy, but also make them a better bonsai. As part of my Easter reflection program for myself, I don't want to get too deep and philosophical about it, but I want philosophical about it, if I can get the word out. I don't, and I, it doesn't have to be, anything super deep, but I was asking myself the other day, I was thinking about it the other day as to, I'm very grateful, and I love what I do. I love bonsai, I love trees, and I love the fact that I get to spend so much time with these little trees in pots, but also with, and this is probably the best part that I love, is that I get to spend so much time with people who love little trees in pots. And it sounds crazy, but I think that bonsai for me really brings out the best in who I am. And it's nice. I don't want to get too deep about it, but I don't know. I wrote down on a piece of paper, where would I be without bonsai? And I just don't know, to be honest. I can't imagine a day in my life where bonsai isn't part of it. Whether I'm, anywhere around the world, and I walk past a tree in a foreign country, the first thing I think about is styling and shaping and how that would grow and its growth structure and its, how the branches appear and its form and its shape, its flow, its movement, all that stuff. And that it's, I don't know, it's like an ADHD thing for me. I can't seem to get my head away from thinking about trees in some shape or another. And, I get asked a lot because I do bonsai. That's my job. I do bonsai. I might get that on a t-shirt. But because bonsai is part of it, does it feel like work to me? Do you get sick of it? And, there's that old adage, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I've always said that. But to be honest, I don't ever feel reluctant to go out and do something in the yard, or to go to someone's house and work on trees, or to have people come into my workshop with trees. I never go, oh my God. Sure, I can be tired like everyone else, and I can be exhausted. And, God, if I did this podcast at the end of every potting season, I reckon the chat wouldn't be quite as pleasant as what it is now as we head towards sort of winter. But, repetitive nature of things, it does get to me like it gets to anybody. If you're putting nuts on bolts for a living, I'm sure the first couple per day would be okay, but by the 50,000th bolt that you're putting a nut on, at the end of that day, you'd be sick of it. And that I think applies to a lot of people. But the fact, I can't imagine life without bonsai. And I'm sure that everyone that listens to this podcast, I mean, what are we now? We're season 7, episode 15. Now, this is the third year in a row where, bar 1 week of the year, the podcast is coming out every goddamn week. And if you've listened to all of them, as I get the messages that people that maybe have just found it are tearing through episodes, like, you don't forget your family, of course, but you're spending a lot of time listening to me drone on about bonsai and pruning and weeding and bloody watering systems. I'm not going to start, but if you've got that passion as well, I think about it all the time as to what motivates people or drives people to feel the way that I feel. And it's like there's something magical about trees. People who maybe aren't really into bonsai, that for whatever reason they may have a misconception about what we do with these trees and that we're being mean or whatever. But we're not. We're giving them love like they're one of our children. They're part of our family. Well, they are. They're definitely part of my family, these trees that I have. And whether they get sold somewhere down the track, doesn't mean I think any less of them. I still feel like every single day when I go out there and do what I do, that they're an extension of my family, and I love them for it. And I'm sure that I like to think that maybe their branches lift up a little bit when they see me as well, and they smile because they know that they're getting treated far better than if they were allowed to grow in the wild or whatever. But you talk to people who go for walks through national parks or through forests or whatever, and their approach to trees, their feeling about trees is exactly the same as mine. So I think it's that we're all in that tree lover category. Well, I definitely am. I'm in that tree lover category, and I love special trees in the wild. But there's something that refines it and brings me back to a very special group of people, boys and girls and whatever in between, that 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 love these trees, and we get to spend a lot of time with them up close and personal. Whereas you go for a walk in the forest, I find myself all the time. I'll go past a special tree. To me, it doesn't need to be special to anyone else, but I go past a special tree to me, and I find myself just wanting to touch it. Just to put my hands on the tree, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but I feel sometimes, and it gives me tingles now talking about it, but I feel connection with trees when I touch them. That maybe I'm not a tree whisperer, but I certainly feel the presence of trees at all stages. I love it. I find myself walking along hedges and just sort of drifting my hands along a hedge or something like that. It's just something about them, and I don't know honestly where my life would be. I don't think I'd be as happy if I hadn't found bonsai, and that doesn't mean anything negative about anyone or anything in my life, but I just know that I'm a far better person and a far saner person by having these trees and having something to think about away from yourself, just like you do with your family. For me, family is it. That's the pinnacle of my life. But my bonsai are definitely in there as well, and trees are definitely in there where I feel that connection to them. And I don't know, I just hope by talking about it with people on the Bonsai Stuff podcast that you sort of feel the same way as well. And it maybe I love the thought of normalizing these things, so you don't feel like you're isolated and that something maybe's not wired correctly in your brain when you sit there and think, geez, I love my bonsai. And it's like, I'll keep that to myself. I won't tell anybody, because you go to a bonsai show. I'm bloody positive that 99% of the people that walk around, maybe they feel that way about the trees, which is why they've donated their money to go and walk in there and look at the trees. Maybe they're art lovers, but there's some kind of connection with bonsai. But you won't walk around telling everyone that comes near, geez, I love bonsai. I love trees. I love it. But anyway, I put myself out there in this podcast because I think it's nice for everyone to feel, or to maybe see how I feel about these things. You don't have to see bonsai as your life, but I'm sure that there's a passion for the trees there that you have as well, that maybe you haven't verbalized with other people, and you don't have to. Like, you don't have to go to your local supermarket, stand up on the counter and scream, "I love bonsai," or anything like that. But it's nice to feel that warm glow that we are part of a family when you love trees. And it doesn't matter what your background is, what your age, or anything about you, that that you've got the same passion that I do. Maybe even if you've got 1/100th of the passion that I do about these trees in pots, well, you're still part of it as far as I'm concerned. So, I've said it before that I think bonsai people are special people, and I honestly mean it. And I just can't imagine where life would be without bonsai for all of us. And I think we're very fortunate and very lucky. Geez, that was a bit more heartfelt than what I'd intended when I wrote that down. But anyway, there you are. That's me. My heart on my sleeve. You should know me pretty well by now if you've listened to more than about 10 seconds of the podcast, and where my allegiance lies with these trees and with anyone in the bonsai world. That I'm always here for anything that I can do to help, no matter where you are around the world. And while I might not always have the answers, I might not, as I found out the other day, helping, trying to give advice to somebody who came to the workshop with a tree that was, well and truly dead. I can't always offer the magic answer that will bring trees back from the dead. I certainly do try my hardest. I certainly do intend to help as much as I possibly can, and I'm always here. And hopefully you can pass on as much as possible to other people in the bonsai world. Happy Easter. Thanks for listening in. I do love you all, and thank you for the subscribers. I say it all the time. If you do love the podcast, then seriously, think about becoming a podcast subscriber, because it means a hell of a lot to me, and it really does help. But anyway, thank you very much for listening in. Spend that time with your bonsais. Do those reviews. Have a good hard look at yourself. Make sure that you're on track. Don't let the years slip by. A third's gone already. Don't let it slip past again. Make sure that you're doing your end of the bargain with your trees. Do that review. I think it really helps to either give you a pat on the back for some trees. Maybe it'll give you a bit of a prompt to do a bit more, work a bit harder, do a bit extra with a few trees as well. But in the end, you can achieve the objectives that you want to achieve, and it's going to make you happier and your bonsai better as well. Anyway, thanks for listening in. Until next time, as always, happy bonsai.